Hello buddy, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at my 7.21 support tier list with just a really brief look at meta-analysis and sort of what's changed in the meta over the last few patches and why it's changed and how that's influencing the tier list. So we'll do the meta-analysis first and we'll go into the tier list. If you didn't check out my patch notes video, which talks specifically about the changes in patch 7.21, be sure to check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. And yeah, let's go ahead and get started. You can also access this Google Doc in the description, and I'll have some timestamps for key moments if you want to jump around and find your favorite spots as well. Let's go ahead and get this going. Okay, so meta-analysis first. Okay, so the things that have changed the most are moderation of enchanters and moderation of tanks. So the moderation of enchanters, I don't want to say like the fall of enchanters or the fall of tanks because I still think they're viable. They just are not unequivocally the best thing you should be doing all the time at every role, right? So what happened to enchanters? Okay, so we've got the coin nerf. Don't forget this has been nerfed twice now. So it still gives a lot of gold. So that's good. So it still has its late game scaling. However, champions that choose to get this are going to have a much worse early game because they're going to get a lot less mana. Right, so it used to be 15% mana a few patches ago. Let's pull it up here just so you can kind of see the evolution of this item. So it used to be 15%. And then in 7.16, they changed it from 15 to 10% of missing mana. So, this is significant, right? So if you're missing, early game, if you have, 400 mana and you're missing half of it, whatever. So if you're missing 200 mana, you would get 30 back, and now you're only getting 20 back. And then they just recently reduced it from 10 to 6, and they reduced the minimum amount that you could get back from 15 to 10. So this is really going to strongly impact if you are, around that 200 mana threshold or so. Now you're only going to get 12 mana back, when just a few patches ago you would have gotten 30 mana back, missing 200 mana. So that's a really big deal, because if you start thinking of the mana cost of some of these champions, like a Janna shield, I think Janna's shield early on is somewhere around like 70 mana a piece, and I know that Sona's W, her heal is 80 mana, and so when you're talking of going from like 30 mana back to whatever 12 mana back, that's really big. That's a lot. I mean, obviously it's a lot. So what this means is that you're gonna have a lot less spells you can cast if you choose to go coin, and that's either gonna hurt your damage or hurt your healing output in the early game significantly. So it's really sort of earmarking, if you get coin, you're gonna be very weak early game. It doesn't have any stats on it, no AP, no cooldown, or it does have cooldown reduction, but no AP, no health, none of that stuff. Now, if you upgrade it to Nomads, you do get more cooldown reduction, you do get some health regen, but you still don't get any more, and it's still only 6% missing mana. You just get extra money, which is good. So the money's still great. And so if the game goes beyond, like maybe 25 minutes or so, you're going to have a significant amount more gold than you would off of something like Spell Thieves. However, they just buffed Spell Thieves as well. So now you get 10 ability power instead of just 5, which is huge. I mean, 10 ability power, and you don't get any cooldown reduction there. You do get mana regen though. But 10 ability power is roughly the equivalent of like 210 gold or so. So you're getting 210 gold of combat power here. Whereas 5% cooldown, I mean, you could call that combat power if you want. I really don't think it's that much. But this is like, at best, 5% cooldown is going to be like 130 gold. But it's not, like, that's kind of a combat power, but not really. It just lowers your cooldowns just a little bit, saving stop. Like, combat power, things like AD, AP, health. Those are kind of like your main, like, core combat power type of thing. So, because fights are going to be over a lot of times before this, 5% kicks in enough times for it to matter. So this is much, much better in combat early, and the passive gives you an additional 10 damage on hit up to 3 times. That means you have 30 extra damage sitting there, which is really, really big for early game trading. That you just get a bonus 30 damage in a skirmish, potentially, in addition to having 10 ability power. And now that mana regen is actually pretty significant, because on someone like Janna, they're going to have 12 base mana regen per 5. And if you get, 25% of that, that means you're getting 3 extra mana regen per 5. So that means that you're getting 36 mana per minute off of that. And that's whether you're at full mana, half mana, whatever. Whereas the coin, like we said, even if you're missing half of your mana bar, which is quite a lot, you're only going to be getting 12. So here, you would be getting 36 versus 12. So you're getting 3 times as much mana over the course of a minute, assuming you get 1 blue coin per minute. I mean, you could get more than that, but even you'd have to get 3 blue coins per minute to equal out what Spell Thief's giving you, even if you're missing half your mana bar. So Spell Thieves gives you a lot more mana. And then once you upgrade Spell Thieves to Frostfang, then it gets even better. So then you get 20 ability power, then you get your 10% cooldown reduction, which is matches what you get off of the Ancient Coin upgrade. So now they would have the same amount of ability power. Now this, or same amount of cooldown reduction. This one does cost more to combine. Actually, it doesn't. It's 350 base, and then it's 500 to combine. So it's the same as the tier 2 coin. But now you get 20 ability power, 10% cooldown reduction, and you get 50% mana regen, which is good. Keep in mind also with mana regen that stacks into Athene's Unholy Grail, if you want to get that. And so having this extra 50% mana regen would translate into 10 additional AP. Is that right? 25. Yeah, 10 additional AP on Athene's Unholy Grail, which is, an extra 200 gold worth of value on that item. Whereas coin doesn't actually have mana regen, it just has blue coins. That has no benefit for Athene's Unholy Grail. We'll talk about that when we talk about Sona itemization here in just a second. But this is this is a major shift where coin is a lot weaker early on because you don't get any mana hardly out of it. And that really hurts mana hog champions like Nami, like Sona, Janna. All of these champions are hurt by that. And Spell Thieves was buffed quite a lot early on to get that extra ability power. So that's one thing that sort of changed. And so basically what that means is that champions like Zyra, like Brand, even like Nami and Sona, who can harass early with mana, can really punish champions like Janna, Lulu, Janna and Lulu in particular. Because they're just not going to have, they're not going to get enough mana to trade back their spells as much because they still want to run coin. I guess Lulu can run Spell Thieves as well. So it mostly hurts Janna because Janna really, really does not want to run Spell Thieves because she doesn't have a good way to trigger it outside of just auto-attacking, which is not great for her, even with the extra range. So all of this hurts Janna the most, but it hurts a lot of other enchanters too because champions like Zyra can now harass them down, and if they choose to go coin, then they're not going to be able to keep up as much with the heals and shields. So that makes champions like Zyra, like Fiddlesticks, like Brand a little bit stronger. Okay, so that's one thing. The Ardent obviously is a nerf. I talked about this in my patch notes video. It's not so much of a nerf. Let me go ahead and pull that up because everyone always asks me, is this the death of Ardent Sense or is it the death of Ardent Sense? It's not. It's not. It's definitely weaker, but it's not the death of Ardent Sensor by any means. So let me pull up my patch notes here. And grab the Goo doc really quickly, just so I can show you kind of the math behind it. I think a lot of people had not really looked at the patch notes because I get asked about that. I've been asked about that constantly on stream. And I'm just like, guys, go look at the patch notes. I'm going to talk a lot about it. So here's kind of the breakdown of sensors. So basically what the deal is, it gives you 800 gold per person that you buff. So the base stats are 2,500 pretty much, and it only costs 2,300. So it does pay for itself. It does give a huge buff. But by comparison, the stats after the last round of buffs were 1,200 a person. And before that, on the Worlds patch, what people are playing right now, at Worlds, it was about 1,800 gold per person that you shielded. So it has steadily gone down. So instead of 1,200 gold worth of stats, now it's 800 gold worth of stats at level 9. But it's still the best. I mean, it's way better than Athene's Unholy Grail as a first item. You can put it in instead of Redemption. the thing about Redemption, though, is a lot of the stats on the Redemption... I didn't do the base stats here, which... I probably should have done that, but I was just looking at kind of the active and how that worked. The actives are similar, right? So if you hit 2 people with Redemption at level 9, you're going to get about, you know, the item's going to be worth about 3,700 gold. About 175% efficiency. If you hit 5 people, it's 290% efficiency versus 5 people with Ardent Sensor, which is, you know, about 282% efficient. But these stats are just so much better on this item. Like, you get ability power, move speed, mana regen, cooldown reduction, you get all this good stuff. On this, you do get health, which is good, and you do get cooldown reduction. But instead of ability power, you get, like, mana regen and health regen, which aren't, like, very good combat stats. The mana regen is really nice on a lot of champions for sure, but the health regen doesn't matter most of the time. So Ardent just has better baseline stats, and it scales about the same as Redemption earlier. And another big one is Redemption has a large fail rate. Like, people can just run out of Redemption and not get healed. Whereas with Ardent, they can't mess that up. If you heal them, they get the buff. That's it. Ardent also doesn't have a cooldown. So whenever your heal is up, you can, you know, distribute that buff. Whereas Redemption, if it's on CD, it's just a really bad item. And then it has a really high fail rate, as I said before. So Redemption is still, like, it's all right, but it's not strong enough to replace Ardent Sensor. So the build is still, for a lot of champions, going to be Ardent, Redemption, Athene. So that's not going to change for Enchanters. But unequivocally, this does make other types of champions stronger, like tank supports and AP supports, because now they're not going to get completely destroyed as soon as Ardent Sensor gets completed. So it is still a power spike for the support and AD carry bot lane, but it's not nearly as pronounced as it used to be. You know, it's about 1/3 less powerful in terms of that buff, going from 1,200 to 800 gold worth of stats. So it's still good. It's still viable. That's not the death of all enchanters, but it is. It certainly is not as strong as it was. Okay, it's just more balanced. All right, and then the direct nerfs to Janna buff assassins, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Janna, you know, herself is much weaker than she used to be. Excuse me. Sector basic attacks doesn't matter, honestly. The change to her W is about the same. It is annoying that it only slows for 2 seconds instead of 3 like it used to, which is, I mean, that's kind of a big deal. But, you know, functionally, it's basically the same as it was, right? So it still gives you a little bit of movement speed. You don't have as much, but this now gives you some extra movement speed because you get the extra 8%. So that kind of balances out. So it's still the same thing where it's like, okay, you have a slow. That's it. You know, you just throw it on people to slow them in combat. It's not that big of a deal. The tornado change is interesting. It's cheaper, so you can use it to push early on if you want to. But the projectile is a little bit slower, so it's harder to interrupt some champion movements if you're perpendicular to them. So for example, if you are like in sort of a triangle, like if you're standing beside your AD carry but not right in front of them, and like Leona tries to latch on your AD carry and you try to throw a tornado at the Leona while she's in midair, you're probably not going to hit it in time because this moves slower. Whereas old Janna could have done that, could have pulled that off easier. So it does make stopping some movement a little bit more difficult with the tornado, but it's okay. And then of course her shield is a lot weaker. It's only 210 instead of 240, which is a big deal. You know, it's like 12% lower shield. And of course the cooldown is very pronounced in lane. 18 seconds on level 1 is pretty huge. Yeah, and then the mana cost, as you can see, goes up quite a bit. So she can definitely be bullied out early. But later on, you know, her cooldown is about the same. Yeah, her shield did take a hit, but it still has 70% AP, some other good stuff. And her ultimate's the same. So she's still really powerful kind of in the mid to late game, especially after she gets a couple of items. But in the early game, she can definitely be bullied out. And so what that means is Janna was very disruptive to the entire kind of league ecosystem because like melee assassins just can't do anything. Like if she's in the game, it's not happening in a team fight. Like unless the Janna just like completely fell asleep, like you're not going to kill anybody unless you're hyper fed, because she can just knock you back with the tornado, knock you back with the ult, shield people, start dropping redemption, exhaust. There are just so many things that just keep assassins from doing what they want to do. And so, and you know, there was no trade-off for this either in lane because her shield was up all the time. and she could afford to take exhaust because she doesn't want to fight in the lane anyways because she's going to outscale everybody. And so she could just be very defensive and there were no repercussions unless you had a much stronger AD carry with a longer range. So, you know, if you have Janna, Ezreal or something, and the enemy picked like Twitch, like Lulu Twitch or Lulu Cog or something, that was one of the only bad situations for Janna, is if the enemy team just had a lot more scaling than she did. But now that she's been nerfed, people aren't picking her as much. They do pick her, but she can be bullied out early game and set pretty far behind. And that means that now people can play Kha'Zix more again. Now they can play Zed, Talon, Kayn, just all of these champions that they had not been able to play before because there's a possibility Janna may not be picked in the game. And if she is picked, then if you just can't bottom lane, you might be able to completely shut her down. So the Janna is still good. She's just not oppressive and as good as she was, and that opens up a space for more assassins, which hurts all enchanters, right? So when there's not the threat of Janna there, people can pick, you know, Talon or Zed with more confidence. And then if you want to play something like Soraka or Nami or Sona, then you're going to suffer from that because, you know, you're going to get blown up by these assassins a lot of times. So just the threat of Janna being around a lot of times. Now, she was banned a lot too, but, you know, just the threat of Janna being around kind of stopped a lot of people from playing those types of assassins. And then finally, enchanters are very good with tanks. And how this works, I explained this in a lot of past videos, but pretty much you got to remember that healing and shielding scales off of resistances. So, for example, let me put this down here. Let's say that you have 100 armor, and you're going to take if you have 100 armor and something tries to deal 100 physical damage to you, then it's only going to deal 50 damage. So that means it's going to so damage is reduced by 50%. If you have 100 armor, assuming they don't have any armor penetration or anything like that. That's how it works. It's a really simple example. So it's going to require 200 physical damage to kill you. The same is true of a shield. And so if you have... okay, so the same is true of a shield. It's going to require 200 physical damage to break it, okay? So that's important to recognize. Now, if you go to 200 armor, I believe that's going to require 600 physical damage to break. It's going to require 100% more damage, 200% more damage. I think it's maybe 200. More damage. Let me look at armor really quick. I think that every one armor that you have, it requires an additional 1% to kill, to break. So if you have 100 armor, it takes 200 to break. If you have 200 armor, I believe it's going to take 400. 200% additional. Maybe, I think it is 600. Let me just look that up really quick. 100's 0.5. It's been a while since I've done the formula. So if you have, I think it's 200's 0.5. It's 100 divided by one. Oh, it's 100. Let's say 100 divided by 200. Okay, it's 0.5. Okay, that's right. So if you have 200 armor, it'd be 100 divided by 300, 3.33. Okay, so it would require 66% more damage to kill. Something, I don't know. Okay, look, here's the thing. I believe it's 400. I think it's 400 physical damage to break. But the point is that I want to make here is that the shield, that counts. So if you only had, you know, 50 armor, then the shield, it would require a lot less damage to break the shield. So the more armor somebody has, because your shield value is always the same that you put on someone. You throw a base Janna shield on someone, it's 210 shield. But if you have 100 armor, then it's going to take double that to be able to break it. So it's going to take, you know, 420 to break it, right? Whereas if you had someone who had 0 armor, in that case, let's just say for whatever reason they had 0 armor, it would only take 210 physical damage to break that shield. But because they have 100 armor, it's going to take 420. So in other words, the more armor somebody has, the harder it's going to be to break the shield off of Janna. And that's why Janna is best with tanks, because if you're shielding someone who has very low armor, you know, someone like an 80 carry or a Zed or something like that, it's still an okay shield, but it's going to break a lot faster because they don't have the armor to break the shield. Heals are similar, right? So health goes a lot longer. It means a lot more if you have resistances. So someone, you know, who has 100 HP and 0 armor is going to die in something that deals 100 damage, right? But if they have that 100 armor, then it's going to take 100 damage to get through it. So, or 100 extra damage to get through it for 200 total. And so if you heal somebody for 100, and they have 100 armor, then it's going to take 200 damage to counteract that heal, similar to how the shield works. You see what I'm saying? So that's why tanks are so much better with enchanters, is because you can just keep healing and shielding the tanks, and they're just never going to die, because all of those heals and shields also scale with armor, because it takes that much more to kill the amount that you healed or to break through the shield. Okay, so that's why when tanks are not good, then enchanters typically are not good. And that's why you didn't see them earlier in the season when everyone was playing assassins. You know, it was like Kha'Zix, Rengar, Graves, just the lethality meta. No one was playing tanks because tank items were bad and games were just ending too quickly, and that means no one was playing enchanters. So tanks are becoming less popular, which means by sort of association, enchanters are going to be less strong because tanks aren't going to be there. So that's not to say that Janna's not useful if you have an all squishy team. She can be, but she's not as useful as if you're healing and shielding like a Gragas, a Sejuani, Cho'Gath, things like that. So enchanters are still strong, they're just a little bit more situational. We gotta pick up the speed here a little bit if we're gonna get through this. I just want to break this down and explain it, because a lot of people don't understand why these shifts happen in the meta. They're not just random, they're not just because people feel like it, although they kind of are sometimes in terms of tanks. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But they are actually because all these champions exist in an ecosystem in comparison with each other. So as I just explained, enchanters aren't just good just because, they're good when tanks are good most of the time, because they work very well with tanks. So you have to look at the big picture to understand why specific classes of champions and why specific champions in general are going to be strong or not. Okay, moderation of tanks. This is another one. So there's been direct nerfs to numerous tank items. You have Knight's Vow has been nerfed. Righteous Glory's been nerfed, Cinderhulk was nerfed, Bramblevest was nerfed. So there have been a lot of nerfs to various tank items over the last few patches. So there are still some outliers. Warmogs is still ridiculously powerful with Cinderhulk. Gargoyle Stoneplate is still really good with Locket of the Iron Solari. So there are still some outliers. Actually, I think they changed Gargoyle. They nerfed it a little bit to where it's not quite as good with Locket and it's not quite as good with Cho'Gath. But both of those are still pretty good items. But they have nerfed the items. They've, you know, tweaked them down just a little bit so tanks aren't quite as oppressive as they were. So that's a thing. And then they've had direct nerfs to several champions. So like Sejuani, they just nerfed this patch. Cho'Gath's been nerfed. Gragas was nerfed. They still haven't nerfed J4 for some reason. But there have been several tanks that have kind of been nerfed here. And then finally, we've got, and the Enchanters. Once again, the Enchanter nerfs affects tanks. So if Enchanters aren't as good, then tanks aren't going to be as good either. It's a two-way street. And so because they've nerfed Janna, because they've nerfed Ardent Censer and Coin, this hurts tanks. Okay, because that means people are going to be playing Enchanters less, and tanks are just not going to be as tanky as they once were. All right. So the end of season mentality shift. So this is a real thing. This isn't always a thing where people just don't feel like playing certain types of champions. But I think that's what we have here. It's a combination of tank fatigue and just end of the season sort of mentality shift. So a lot of people are thinking you have to carry really hard in games and that tanks can't do that, that they're too team reliant. The same could be said of Enchanters. Maybe some people are listening to the YouTube Illuminati out there and saying, oh, well, you can't win with Janna, or there's no way you can carry with Sona or whatever. So maybe I should go play Brand or something. So, you know, some people are going to start shifting to play these damage champions again in both of these roles. And so, and people just get tired of playing tanks, I think, too. A lot of junglers. People just get bored. You know, they just want to do damage. They want the kills and stuff like that. And so, you know, they're going to be less likely to play Sejuani and more likely to play something like Kayn in the jungle right now, I feel like. Or Ezreal. So I think it's a mentality shift, partially because of the end of the season and partially just because tanks have been good for so long now that people just want to play something a little different. So I think all of this, I still think tanks are very good, to be clear. I still think Jarvan is very overpowered. I still think that Rammus is good. I think Sejuani's still pretty good. Cho'Gath's good. I still think the tanks are good. I just think people aren't going to play them as much. And I've seen that reflected in my games. If we go and look here. At some of these games I've been involved in lately. I have been on a pretty good win streak with the diversity of champions. See, I still play Sona, still play Janna. I'm just weaving in a little bit more AP champions. Still have a good win rate with Janna. There's just a little bit more diversity than there used to be. But if you look at a lot of these games, there just are not that many tanks. Like this one, enemy team didn't have any tanks. Like, because Thresh, I don't really count Thresh as a serious tank. He's like an engage bruiser type of champion. But yeah, none of these champions are going to be super tanks. We did have a Jarvan on our team, so we had one tank. Look at this one. My team doesn't have any tanks. They don't really have any tanks over here. We didn't have any tanks here. They did. They had one over there. No tanks. We had a tank. They had a tank. We had a tank. So you're starting to see like one tank, maybe, right? But it's a lot less tanky champions than you would have seen certainly, you know, a month ago, I feel like. Like this one, no tanks on this team at all. This one had a couple. So, yeah, that's just a very, very common trend. This team, no tanks. I guess like Darius. You want to count Darius. But yeah, no, people just aren't playing the big stuff. You know, they're not playing the Cho, the Sejuani, the Gragas as much. They do show up. They are here. This one was Sej versus Gragas. But it's a lot less common than it used to be. And this is some of the reasons for it. Okay. So the rise of squishy DPS. This is something that's really on the rise, especially AD champions. So you're seeing more Kha'Zix, Zed, Talon, Kayn. And you're also seeing Ezreal and Jax. So these are becoming a lot more popular. Irelia, Renekton's not really squishy. I guess Irelia is kind of, depending on how she builds. But you're seeing a lot more of these bruiser slash kind of squishy type of champions coming in. And that's because those champions aren't very good against mega tanks because they need to kill people quickly. Because they have either high cooldowns in the case of Zed for his like all-in damage distribution, or they're very vulnerable if they don't kill people and get resets like Kha'Zix. So when tanks fall out of the meta, also when enchanters start falling out of the meta, then you start getting more of these squishy DPS coming in. Okay, and then this opens up a space for AP supports. specifically Fiddlesticks, who I'll talk about here in a second. But slower Enchanter power spike means there's more time for domination. So because they aren't going to have as much mana early on, you can really bully them out. If they run coin, you can really bully them out with a Spell Thief AP champion like Zyra, Fiddlesticks, early on, Brand. And because Ardent Censer isn't just going to completely crash the lane as soon as they complete it, you're still going to have a bit more time to scale up. Because it's going to take them like an extra item before they can really start dominating. So it's still going to be tough to crack through that Sona who has, you know, Redemption, Ardent Censer, Athene's Unholy Grail, but she's going to be less powerful for a much larger portion of the game. Okay, and then AP champions also complement other high damage roles. So when you're playing someone like Kha'Zix or Zed or Talon, you don't want long fights, as I just described, because they usually have long cooldowns, or they just, as part of their rotation, you know, they just need to kill people immediately. And so AP supports allow you to do that much faster, right? So when you go in and, you know, Kane's all-inning someone, if you can fear that person with Fiddlesticks and then drain them, or like use your Fiddlesticks ult over a wall to start a fight, and then all the assassins pile in afterwards, that's going to be a lot better than Janna sitting there and like, you know, shielding Zed when he goes in. Like, it's okay to do that, but it's not going to be as effective as using an AP champion to complement the damage. Okay, and you're starting to see more of a rise of early game bully AD carries too. Like, you're seeing more Misfortune, Jhin, Varus, and I'm not sure if those are necessarily a lot better than the crit strikers like the Twitch, the Xayah, things like that early on. But they're certainly getting a bit more power for these reasons I just described. So now people can run AP supports and they don't have to worry as much about Ardent Censer. I mean, a big reason why someone like Jhin wasn't played as much is because he's awful with Ardent Censer. And he's not very good with Enchanters in general, because he wants to blow people up quickly, because he can't win long fights. He can't win a long gunfight with like a Tristana, for example. He has to blow up people fast, and he's horrible against tanks. So it just hasn't been Jin's year ever since they nerfed him several times and the meta shifted away from him like back in March. But now you might start seeing him back a little bit. Like I said, I don't think he's back in the full swing yet, you know, where Jhin is the best, but I think he's certainly more viable than he was, and the same is true of Misfortune and Varus. So I think that Twitch, Caitlyn, Tristana, I still think those champions are all pretty good, but this kind of even the scale a little bit here. Okay, so what does all this mean? How does all this feed into the tier list itself? So I think Sona is now #1, and the reason is she's able to bully out Janna really hard early on, and she can kind of hold her own against the APs because she has very good poke. So if you look at Sona, and I'm not going to upgrade these mini guides, that'll tell you kind of some older itemization. I'm just going to wait till next patch when the new season comes in, then I'll upgrade all of them. But it has some pretty good general gist of matchups and itemization and things like that on these Google Docs here. And I need to upgrade I forgot to change these numbers around. This kind of reflects where they were last patch compared to where they are now. So these aren't accurate. I'm going to have to tinker with those. But let's look at Sona really quickly. So what's up with Sona? You know, with the rise of all these other AD like assassin type of champions, usually Sona's not very good into those, but she does have some pretty good matchups in lane, and if you position carefully, you can still survive in fights against some of these other people, especially if you get Ninja Tabi, and if you have to, you can even get something like a Zeke's Convergence, which is not amazing on her, but it's okay. It does give you armor, and you do have a relatively low cooldown ultimate. And it does hold people in place. So Zeke's is okay on her if there are assassins and you really need to try to deal with that. So she does have some itemization options, but she's still not going to be the best into something like, you know, a Hyperfed Akali, for example. So, you know, take that into consideration, but she is very good in lane. So what makes her good, part of it is the cost of her Hymn of Valor Harass is very cheap. So it's only 45 cost, and it has a 0.7 ratio, and it hits 2 people, and it charges your power cord. So, you know, if you walk up, auto attack somebody, Hymn of Valor, you're going to get 60 damage for 45 cost with a 0.7 ratio. So if you have, you know, something like 30 AP, which is pretty standard with the new Spell Thieves, It's like going to do 21 extra damage. So you're going to be doing like 81 damage for 45 mana early, which is really good. And that scales up very nicely. You know, once you get a second point in there, then it's going to be, 120 something for 50. So it only goes up in 5 cost increments. So that's pretty good. And it's on a low cooldown. It has an excellent range. So it's just great at harassing, stacks your power cord, which also does pretty strong damage. So she has good harassment in lane, and then she has a really powerful heal if you use it correctly. Now I have an entire Sona guide if you want to see this, but this heal is really bad if you're just healing one person. So it's 80 mana. If you're just healing your 80 carry for 35, that's awful. Okay, it's really, really inefficient. However, if you heal 2 people, all of a sudden it's 80 for 70, which is still not great, but it's okay. Remember, heals are much more powerful than damage because they scale with resistances. So when you attack somebody with Hymn of Valor, if they have 100 magic resist, it's going to reduce, you know, your damage by 50%. But if you shield somebody, then remember, and they have 100 magic resist, then it's going to take double the amount to get through it. So in some ways, heals and shields are, you know, up to 4 times as powerful as damage. So that's why a lot of heals aren't super cost efficient and shields, because they're just a lot more powerful than damage because of the way scaling works. But anyways, so if you heal 2 people at level 1, all of a sudden it's 70. But if you get the double shield as well, so if you heal somebody while you're actively trading, so you're 80 carry and you both go up to auto attack and they fight back, you heal and you get the shield, and they use the full value of the shield, then all of a sudden you're getting 130 for 80 cost, which is actually pretty good. And if you get this to level 3, by the time you're level 5, then all of a sudden that's 150 plus 160. That's 310 value for only 90. So then it starts becoming really efficient. So as you level this up, and as you're actively in combat, healing 2 people and shielding 2 people, then this becomes extremely powerful. And this is why you need to max your W. Like, you can get 1 or 2 points of Hymn of Valor for harassment, but your W needs to be maxed for mid-game team fights, because it's not only heals and shields you and your ally, but it can potentially shield everyone on your whole team. So when you get to level 9, you heal an ally and you for 115 each, that's a 230. But then you could put a 130 shield potentially on your entire team, right? And so this, you know, the potential for this is 650 plus 230 is what, 880 shield plus heal for a total of 100 mana. So that's like, you're getting an 8-to-1 payout, almost a 9-to-1 payout on mana to shield and heal, which is really good. And then obviously the 25% affects 2 people. That's a 0.5 ratio. The 0.3 affects up to 5 people. So you have like a 2.0 AP ratio, potentially, in addition to, you know, a 9-to-1 payout. So this is extremely powerful, like oppressively powerful in team fights. So if the fight isn't over in like 5 seconds and there's a Sona on the team that kind of knows what she's doing and is walking around and putting this aura on everybody, it's just really hard to lose that fight. And so that's what makes her really strong, is that she has good harassment in lane. She has excellent team fighting capabilities. This also gives everyone who touches the aura a bonus, so it helps you spike down dragons and barons really quickly, because you can just spam this. You know, every time you spam it, you're doing 160 damage, and, you know, potentially 5 people are going to be doing this for 300 damage. So you're doing up to 460 damage with a 1.5 AP ratio on it when you're with your whole team trying to spike Baron. That's a lot of damage. That's on like a, you know, like a 3-second cooldown once you get all your CDs. So it's really strong. So she's very good at taking objectives. She's very good at team fights. She's very good at early game poking. And she has an excellent AoE crowd control. So she's great. She's a great combo with people who have area of effect stuff going on. So she's good with like Kennen, Amumu, Jarvan, Sejuani, just anyone that's going to go in and just crowd control a lot of people. She's really good at that. Orianna, Malphite. So there are a ton of situations where this is really good. And even if it's only hitting like a couple of people, that can still be pretty game breaking. It's 1.5 second crowd control, which is pretty decent. So overall, and Sona's very good with Spell Thieves. That's the main thing here that distinguishes her from other supports, is that she's extremely good with Spell Thieves because she scales so heavily off of AP. Like I mentioned before, all of her abilities just have insane AP scaling. if you hit multiple targets. And then it's really easy for her to proc the Spell Thieves itself because you auto attack and you press your Q. So that's going to be 2 procs of Spell Thieves on somebody whenever you hit them for 20 extra damage. So now this early game harassment, you're going to get an extra 20 damage on it. And so that's why she's the best Spell Thief user of the Enchanters. It's because she has the highest scaling AP and she has the best spammable rotation early on to really abuse that extra 5 AP and the on-hit damage. So she's a very good... So she doesn't mind moving away from coin and taking Spell Thieves early, which is what I recommend now. So that's why she's a lot higher than other Enchanters. And she has very good matchups against Sona, or against Janna, because she has much lower cooldown. She can just keep harassing her. She can keep up with Nami early on. They kind of have very similar trading patterns. So both of them just kind of have similar early game aggression. So you're not going to get an edge there, but you're going to outscale her tremendously because your W scales so much better with Athene's Redemption and Ardent Sensor. You can still put Ardent on 5 people so easily as Sona. That's one of her biggest strengths. So yeah, it got nerfed, but when you're putting it on 5 people and you're still getting like 6,500 gold value off that item, it's still pretty good. And obviously she's really uniquely good with Athene's as well because she does so much damage in team fights with her Q and auto attack, so much more damage than other Enchanters, I should say, that it makes Athene's much more efficient on her than any other Enchanter support. So she just itemizes very well. She has a great early game, great late game, great scaling, excellent sort of team fight contributions with her auras and her ultimate. Her, big weakness is she can get zeroed out and killed if you fall behind and an assassin gets fed. So, you might have to change your itemization up, as I said before, and go something like Ninja Tabi or Zeke's or something like that if they have a really fed assassin. But other than that, if they don't have an assassin that gets fed, it's just really hard to lose with Sona. Okay, Fiddle 6. Now, this is going to be... How are we doing on time? Really bad? We're not doing great. We're not. I would like to keep this to an hour, but realistically, it's probably going to be a little more. But there's a lot of changes on this patch, and a lot of people may not understand these changes. Because this is not... I don't do my tier list kind of the lazy way, what I think is the lazy way, where I just look at a stats page, like op.gg or, whatever other tier lists are out there that use statistical analyses. Because stats just don't have the critical thinking, and stats are backward looking. I'm forward looking. I'm trying to predict like what's going to be strong like right now and moving forward. Whereas a lot of those stats, lag behind by several days, and people may just not have figured out some of these things yet. So I try to give you the newest, freshest stuff that I can based on my own logic, reasoning, and extensive experience in the game. So, that's why. Because I've had people say, oh, well, why don't you have, X champion? Like, why isn't Scion, S class? Because he has this high win rate off of like 1% played or something. So, that's why. So you don't have to agree exactly with the tier list, obviously. I'm just trying to explain my reasoning, and then you can apply it to your own game. You can say, you know what, I agree. I want to try out what the strategy professor's thinking. Or, I'm not really sure if I agree with that, but he certainly got me to think about it in a different way. And so maybe I can adjust the champions that I do play or adjust my own builds or outlook on the game. Okay, so Fiddlesticks, the most controversial one. I get... People talk to me about this all the time, and I have... one word for you regarding Fiddlestick support. Malzahar. Okay? Think about that word. Malzahar. So what's the significance of that? Well, the significance is that everyone thought Malzahar was trash as a support when people first started playing him. Now, Fiddlesticks is not new as a support. If you're a newer player, you may not have seen him before, but he was very good in Season 3 and parts of Season 4 back in the day because he was an assassin buster. He was very good in a meta where people were playing lots of melee assassin type of champions because he had a 3-second fear, which is huge. Just point, click, boom, that champion can't do anything. That's a very powerful effect, right? And so he kind of fell out of favor for a long time. So he got nerfed a long time ago, several times. And then there have just been better alternatives to dealing with assassins. And there hasn't really been many assassin metas. There have been some, in the past, but Fiddlesticks just always gets kind of shuffled away. People have traditionally just kind of picked tank supports into assassins, right? So they pick things like Alistar is very good against assassins, or Thresh is pretty good against assassins. But the problem, historically, and why this is changing now is tank supports still aren't that great because of the way itemization has shifted. You know, historically, every support would basically default to buying tank items, right? You would always buy your Locket of the Iron Solari, you might buy a Zyra Portal, you might buy Frozen Heart, like you would default to tank. So even if you played something like Janna, it would still be very common for you to buy Locket of the Iron Solari, or Bulwark, or Aegis of the Legion, or whatever it was called before, depending on your era. It used to be a much beefier item, right? Like it used to be a standalone, you always get this item. You know, if we go back and look kind of historically, like let's look at Bulwark. This is what it was for a really long time, Runic Bulwark. Okay? If you look at an item like this, this was the default item for a really long time, right? So it was only 2,100 gold, roughly, and it gave you 300 health, 20 armor, 30 magic resist, and it gave all allies, including you, 10 armor, 25 magic resist, 10 health regeneration, and all of the minions who were near you gained all of these bonuses as well, like a lot of the bonuses. So it was just your one-stop shop. Like it was just, it was the ardent censor of the past, right, for several years, and just every support got this item. So you would get this item, and then something like Frozen Heart, and that was pretty much it. So the total gold value on the self was 2,900 gold. Then it was 1,000 per champion. So in a team fight, you had an item that was giving you about 8,000 gold. Actually, I guess that'd be 4,000, like 7,000 gold worth of value. In an era when support items were not valuable at all. Right? There just were not a lot of good support items. So you would always get this in Frozen Heart. So what does that mean? That means that there were different solutions to assassins back in the day. You could pick tanks, right? And you did. Alistar, Thresh, all that stuff. Mega popular. Throughout much of League's history, the tanks have ruled. But it's a lot worse these days. If you look at something like Locket right now, it only gives you, like, let's just click on Locket right now. So it's okay, but it's certainly a shadow of its former self, right? So its gold value is only 1,600 base instead of like 2,800, whatever it is. And now you can activate it to use a shield, but the shield is based on level and it's based on your bonus health. So you have to get a lot of bonus health, and it doesn't have any health by itself. So it's a pretty terrible single item rush because you're not going to have a lot of bonus health to increase that shield. And this doesn't work all of the time. It's on a 90-second cooldown. So, and it only is up for 2.5 seconds. So it's okay. It's still one of the better tank items now, but it's certainly a shadow of what tank items used to be. Right? And before Zyra Portal got nerfed, this item used to be pretty prime time too last season. So it's been nerfed a lot. It's not great. This is not great. And this was before plus healing and shielding too back in the day. So the landscape has just changed a lot to empower enchanters and to really take down tanks a lot. And now AP supports are starting to come back, but the tanks still haven't received much love. Now they do have Zeke's Convergence here, which is becoming pretty good, but this is not a great solution to assassins. It's okay, right? Like it has some decent personal stats. It's basically just gold efficient. And it buffs up your AD carry to do some extra on-hit damage, which is not going to matter if they get blown up in 1 second, right? And so Knight's Vow has been what people would pick against assassins, right? But they've nerfed this several times. So, yeah, when you're near your partner, this is getting close to Bulwark type of territory, right? When you're near your partner, you get 2,800, but it's only 1,700 if you're not near your partner. So if you're walking around warding, you can still get caught out and killed by assassins, quite a lot. And this just is 12%, basically not even damage mitigation, damage redirection from the AD carry to you. So this is kind of like you're getting like 24 armor and magic resist, sort of, but not really. So it's nowhere near where Bulwark used to be. But it's decent. This is probably the best option that you have against assassins, so it's okay. But all of this means is that there just are not the same kinds of solutions that there have been in the past. So just because you haven't seen Fiddlesticks in years doesn't mean that he can't be good now, because the landscape has changed. So I said Malzahar. Why did I say Malzahar? Because Malzahar was the solution to assassins back in December and January. And I called this very, very early on, right? Like I was talking about this in early January, and people were just like, oh, you're stupid, you're crazy. If you go back and watch my patch notes for 7.1, you'll see I had people that I duoed with just ask me straight up, "Are you trolling?" when I started playing Malzahar, and Malzahar changed a lot. Let me pull him up really quickly. So Malzahar changed. I think it was in 6.24. I'm giving you all this context because there are going to be so many doubters and haters of Fiddlestick support. So I'm explaining very carefully why I think that Fiddlestick support deserves a spot in the S class, okay? And you need to understand all of these contexts. You can't just look at, well, I've never seen that before. Or, well, that, you know, just sounds stupid. Why haven't we seen that all year if it's good? I'm telling you, okay? So this is why. Just hear me. If you've kind of zoned out, hear me out here why this is important. So Malzahar was the person who served this role. He was the non-tank person that dealt with assassins really, really well. But Malzahar has fallen out of favor. So what made Malzahar good all of a sudden? So back in 6.23, this was the huge change. It was at 6.23. They did a huge overhaul of him here. Ton of stuff going on, but the basic thing that went under a lot of people's radars that I picked up on really early is that his minions do a ton of damage early on. So he has lots of lane pressure. He can push lanes really quickly. And he doesn't, they scaled off of level rather than scaling off of AP. So you didn't need to have a ton of AP to do a ton of damage with Malzahar, and that's a core for supports, is it has to be a champion that can do a lot of damage. If you're playing like a damage type of champion like Zyra, Fiddlestick's brand, has to be someone who can do a ton of damage without many items, because you're not going to be able to afford a lot of items. They reduced the mana cost to 40 from 80, so it's spammable, which is good because you're not going to have a lot of mana, and so on and so forth. We know the story of Malzahar if you've played in Season 7, but this is what happened, is they gave him a lot more lane pressure, and they gave him a lot more base damage. And then he was used primarily so he could pressure in lane. He had kill threat. He could push the lane. And then he was used to lock down those assassins. He was used to lock down Rengar, Kha'Zix, Graves, just all of these lethality champions that were really popular back then. Because he had a point, click, lockdown ultimate for 2.5 seconds. All right, so that's the story of Malzahar. Okay, and he has pretty good crowd control. So he not only has that lockdown, but he also has a huge silence he can do with his Q. Okay, so why did he fall out of favor? Because they nerfed the crap out of his minions. That's basically it. So they changed him back in 7.11 here. It's just like wall of text, basically gutter minions. So they just wanted to say, you know what, those minions are not doing any damage. They gave him better AP ratios on his Q and on his E, but that's not why you played him as support, because you're not going to be building a lot of AP. You played him for the base damage on his W, and they took that away. And so that pretty much ruined him. So that's why we don't see him. So he's okay in the mid lane, but he's bad as support. Okay, so how does this circle around to Fiddlesticks? Fiddlesticks now is the new Malzahar, I think. He may not be as oppressive as Malzahar is because he doesn't have as much early kill pressure, but he has better repeatable crowd control, and he has a much better damage output in team fights. So he's a much better team fighter than Malzahar. One of the big problems with Malzahar is if you didn't get ahead early and you couldn't, he was basically just a pick champion. So you could pick someone off and kill him and that's it. But he really couldn't team fight that well. Like your minions did some pretty good damage, but they would get blown up by area of effect stuff in team fights. And you have to sit there and channel your ult the whole time to get the full 2.5 second. So if you wanted to flash in and ult the 80 carry on the back line, for example, the other 4 people could just dogpile in and kill you before you finish your channel. So Fiddlesticks has similar properties to Malzahar, but I think in some ways he's even better for the current, like, how the meta is shifting than Malzahar was back in the day. So I'm not saying you're necessarily going to see Fiddlesticks banned or played to the extent that Malzahar is. Especially because we're not going to have LCS for a few weeks during the preseason, right? I don't think it comes back until January. So people aren't going to have the pros to copy and emulate for quite a while. So it could go pretty far under the radar unless you hear about it from people like me. Because no one else is going to talk about it. I've never seen anyone talk about Fiddlesticks in recent memories. But what is it about Fiddle? Okay, so first of all, the number one reason you pick Fiddle is his Terrify. This is almost the same amount of crowd control as a Malzahar ultimate, but it's on an 11-second cooldown instead of 120 seconds. That means you can use this multiple times in a fight. Once you get CDR, you know, you can get it down to like 7 seconds or so, right? So it's only got 575 range, so it's slightly shorter. I think Malzahar's ult was 600, but it's much shorter cooldown. And this is point click. Remember, you cannot miss this. That's the thing, is Fiddle 6 is very reliable for the most part. You know exactly what you're going to get. You can't miss a hook. You can't miss, you know, anything else. You just point click and it fears them. Unless you click on a minion or something on accident, you're going to fear them. Okay, so when they're feared, they're basically stunned. They run away. So if they're moving very quickly, they might run away very quickly. Like if it's a Master Yi or something. But this fear is absolutely brutal. If you get a fear on a key target and they don't have a Quicksilver Sash or a Mikhail's Crucible to cleanse it, there's a very high probability they're just going to die. And so this makes him very good at roaming. So if you get mobility boots and you just roam middle, you can get so many kills a lot of times on many champions. Even champions that have decent escapes, right? So if you sneak up behind Ahri and you fear her, you know, her little dash is not going to save her. A lot of times. It's going to be too late. So this makes him very good at picking people off. It makes him pretty good at trading in lane too. Like, people cannot jump onto you because if you fear them and just hold a drain on them, it's going to do an astronomical amount of damage. Also, it's pretty cheap. So you can kind of not spam it in lane, but you can use it fairly liberally in lane. So when someone's under tower trying to last hit, you can actually fear them, like right before they're going to last hit. If you have good vision and you know you're not going to get ganked and all that stuff, you can actually walk up and fear them and force them to miss that CS. Because it doesn't do damage. There's no damage on this, so it doesn't draw tower aggro. So if they're trying to last hit that cannon minion, just fear them and you force them to miss it. You know, sometimes, depending on how it's going, if you fear them, they might miss 2 minions. So it doesn't sound like much, but over the course of a laning phase, if you're constantly pushing them in, which you will with your Dark Wind, we'll talk about that here in a second. If you're constantly pushing them in, and you just force them to miss like 1 or 2 minions every wave, you're going to start to get an incremental advantage over time. You're going to be up, your AD carry is going to be up like 10, 15 CS by the end of the laning phase. So you don't have to do that, but that's a tool in your toolkit that you can do, is you can fear people to make them miss CS. Or if you want to start off, you know, a dive or something like that, it has a lot of utility to it, that it doesn't draw tower aggro. Okay, so that's really good, excellent crowd control, but what about the damage? How is the damage compared to Malzahar? Well, it's not as good as the minions used to be, but it's still pretty dang good. I mean, look at these numbers. Like, it cost 80, so that's a lot more expensive. You know, Malzahar's minions used to be 40. But if they sit in your drain, at a level 1 drain, it's 400 damage. 400. That's like over half their health. Like, they cannot fight you. If you start draining them like that, they either have to knock you out of it with some kind of crowd control, but they cannot fight you. You also heal for 60% of it. So you're dealing 400 damage and healing for, now that obviously doesn't include magic resist and stuff like that, but you're dealing 400 and you're healing for like 270 or something off of one ability that's on it like an extremely low cooldown. That is crazy. That is really crazy. So they have to run. Like, they can't sit there and fight you anymore. And so, you know, if you walk up and terror somebody, throw the crow on them, and then just drain them, like, the fight's over. They have to run. They cannot fight you. And that was a big part of Malzahar too, is whenever you put the Malefic Visions on the enemy and then you dropped a couple of minions, they had to run. They could not fight you because they would just get murdered by those minions. It's similar on Fiddle 6. Not quite as good. A little more mana intensive. But it's still pretty strong. So that's really good. This is also great at tanking Dragon. If you get a little bit of armor, if you start building Hourglass or something, then you could potentially at least tank a few hits of Baron with the drain, right? So you can't like full tank a Baron a lot of times, but you can tank some of it if your jungler's kind of low after a fight and you guys want to do Baron. You can actually step in and tank a little bit of that. You could certainly tank Dragon. So there are plenty of times where you can just go up and just help your jungler tank a Dragon. Even if it's a champion that typically can't take Dragon very early, like if it's an Ezreal who can't do it by himself, he's going to take too much damage, you can go over there, sneak over there if you get a control ward and just tank it for him and let him kill the dragon. So it has a lot of utility. It can kill people, it can heal you up in lane. So if you're getting poked out you know, by a Sona or something like that, then you could potentially heal off of minions, right? And so it has some pretty good utility to it and a ton of damage. And look at that AP ratio. If you do get AP on him, you know, if you end up getting, you know, whatever, like Void Staff or Haunting Guys, Zonya's Hourglass, whatever, it has really, really high scaling. So you're probably not going to get a ton of AP, but pretty good. So once again, that's really good if you go Eye of the Watchers as well. So he's a great Eye of the Watchers user. Okay, Dark Wind is the other one. So this is basically just automatically pushes the lane. So you're not, like, no one's going to be able to keep up with this push hardly. Maybe Caitlyn if she's spamming all of her abilities. But you just throw this on the enemy. It's going to do some damage to them, not a lot, a little bit. A little bit of damage. And then it's just going to bounce around and tear up the minion wave. So you're going to accidentally take a couple of CS from your AD carry, undoubtedly, when you do this. But because you're pushing into the tower, it's likely that the enemy AD carry is also going to miss some CS under tower. And it's not the worst thing in the world if you get a CS or two every now and then. Because you do scale so well with items. So, it's pretty good. Now, one thing about Fiddlesticks that's not mentioned here that I had to, like, go through the history to research and figure out is that they changed the behavior of the Dark Wind, like what it prioritizes. Here it is. So they changed this back in 6.9 to where it prioritizes the person that you're draining. The target of the drain is now virtually guaranteed to take maximum damage. So that means it doesn't just completely bounce around randomly. It targets whatever you're draining. So if you walk in, as I said, the combo is you walk up, you terrify, then you throw the Dark Wind at them, and then you start drain immediately while Dark Wind is in the area. It's going to triple bounce to them if they sit in the drain the whole time. So it always tries to bounce back every time to the Dark Wind targets. That means you can get up to 3 hits on them with this. And now you're talking some extra damage. So now, you know, if you have a couple of points in this, it's 255 damage. If you have it maxed out, it's up to 435 damage on a single target, in addition to 900 damage off of your drain on a single target. That's like 1,300 damage, and this has a 135% ratio on it. So that's massive damage. Like, once again, that's not as much as Malzahar's single target early on, but it's in the ballpark. It's a lot of early damage, especially on single targets. So you can use this to simultaneously harass and push the minion wave, which is pretty powerful. And it has a silence, so it's really annoying to deal with. So if you fear somebody for 2.25 seconds and you silence them for 1.25, that's a full 3.5 seconds that they can't flash or cast any spells if you time it correctly. So that's a lot of crowd control. And this bounces around, so in a team fight, it's going to silence everybody for like 1.5 seconds. And it just kind of does it randomly, which is really frustrating too. Because you're just thinking, man, I just want to be able to cast this spell. I want to jump. I want to do this, you know, whatever to kill this person. And then all of a sudden, just a random crow hits you and you're like, you're like smashing your keyboard and you can't do anything and then you're dead. So Fiddlesticks is just absolutely infuriating to go against. But it's really good. And then finally, you've got your Crow Storm, which is a pretty long cooldown, respectable cooldown. But at level 1, it does 625 damage if they sit in it. At level 3, it does 1,600 damage with a 225% AP ratio. 1,600 damage. Now, yeah, they have to sit in it for 5 seconds, but unless they flash or jump out, when you pop in and fear them, they're going to be sitting in it, you know, guaranteed 3.5 seconds because they're going to be feared and then silenced. So, you know, they may not sit in there the full 5, but they're sitting there for 3.5, and that's a lot. So, I mean, at level 6, if you get this off on somebody, fear them, and then silence and drain them, like, there's virtually no way they survive that. And a lot of times, you can kill multiple people with this. Like, if you jump over a wall and you hit the AD carry and the support, you fear the AD carry, and then the support will try to sit there and peel. You can usually kill them both. So it's really, really good. And it's a great way to start a fight. I mean, it's basically like an 800 flash. It's just really strong. So Fiddlesticks, so this is the key difference between Malzahar and Fiddle, is Fiddlesticks is excellent at picking people off. So he can just hide in bushes, terrify someone, drain them, fear them. You know, you can just walk around with an assassin on your team. He complements assassins very well, because if you just walk up and crowd control someone, obviously, you know, like a Kali or Talon or Zed or whoever, it's just going to kill him. Right, and so he's very good at running around, rotating, ganking people, hiding out in bushes. He is the master of the bush, right? So if you keep really good vision control, you can terrify people or just jump over with Crowstorm and kill them on single targets. Or sometimes in team fights, you can Crowstorm and maybe kill the whole team. So he's very good at team fighting and assassinating, whereas Malzahar was trash at team fighting. And once again, the key is you don't have to channel this like Malzahar. You just press it and then go on with your day. You press it and then you can run away, or you can Dark Wind, or you can Drain. Like, you don't have to sit there and hold it for 2.5 seconds like Malzahar. So that frees you up to do a lot more stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think this opens up a lot of different compositions that he's very good in, potentially, in different scenarios where he's very good. So yeah, if you lose complete control of like all the jungles, you don't have any vision, he can be pretty weak, right? He doesn't have ways to check bushes, and obviously if people know where he is, it's not going to be as strong. But, you know, if you just hold on, you just wait with this. You don't have to start with your Crow Storm. You can just wait. Just fear somebody, even if they see you, even if you're like defending a tower. Just fear, peel, and just wait until people use some of their cooldowns. And then once the enemy team gets kind of low, just channel your Crowstorm and just jump in there to clean them up. So if they're sitting right there watching you, like, don't start with Crowstorm in a fight because they'll just interrupt it or move. But if everyone's really distracted and running around and trying to like focus different targets, they may not see you even in plain sight channeling that Crowstorm. And then you just pop in, kill them, clean everybody up. So I think this makes him really, really good right now because he's very good against assassins. He's great against Kha'Zix, Rengar, just everybody. Now, the one thing that he's kind of weak to is Quicksilver Sash, right? So if they actually get a Quicksilver Sash, they can get out of the Terrify. But just keep in mind, you still have Dark Wind, you still have Drain, and that Terrify is going to be up again in 7 seconds. So yeah, they can break your Terrify, but you still have a lot of other tools in your toolkit. So, and not everybody's going to have Quicksilver Sash. Like, maybe their AD carry does, but maybe their Akali doesn't. Especially AP champions really, really don't want to run Quicksilver. So, like, Ari really doesn't want to have to get Quicksilver Sash. Akali really doesn't want to have to get that item. So, yeah, that positions him really well. So, is Quicksilver good against him? Sure. But you know what? It was still good against Malzahar, too. And Malzahar was still very oppressively powerful. So, I think he's great. He's good with pretty much anybody. Obviously, he's going to be best with people who do a lot of burst damage at level 6 to really make sure that you convert your ultimate into kills. So, you know, he wouldn't be necessarily amazing with someone like Vayne or Sivir or something like that, but he's still okay, you know, with them. His biggest weaknesses are like range champions, because this is really close, like 575 range. So he's not great against Caitlyn, not great against Xerath. Veigar's really annoying to deal with because you can't get through his zone. So yeah, he does have some weaknesses, but I think overall he's pretty good. And you don't have to fight early. I've had people say, well, what if they have a strong engage, you know, champion like Leona or Thresh? You just push them in with Dark Wind and then just don't fight them. Just make them constantly farm under tower. If they ever want to engage on you, like, just don't let the Leona hit you. So if Leona engages on your AD carry, just go fear their AD carry and then silence and then just use your drain on the Leona and she's going to lose the fight, most likely. So just make sure you aren't the one getting hit with the crowd control and you have really good peel if they engage on your AD carry, usually. Now, Leona's not an ideal matchup for Fiddle, but it's still okay. Alright, so I just wanted to spend a lot of time on Fiddle because people are constantly asking me about him. I know that he's someone who's not super common. And so I just wanted to spend a lot of time explaining the reasoning behind why I think he's going to slot really well into this meta, even though we haven't seen him in a really long time. And it's because, once again, tanks have been shifted to where they're not as great against assassins as they used to be because of the itemization, and just they have been nerfed. Primarily I mean Alistar was like the premier anti-assassin because he obviously has 2 really good abilities to, you know, deal with assassins. He has his headbutt and then he has his Q, but the itemization is just not there, and he just doesn't have that 1.5 second knockup like he used to have on his Q. So Alistar's all right. Alistar's pretty decent against assassins. Just the itemization is just not there. So I think Fiddlesticks is a pretty good, pretty good option in a lot of scenarios. Okay, so that's Fiddle. So that's why he has my number 2 slot. He's just excellent against other assassins. So his matchup against Sona is okay. His matchup against Zyra is not that great. Zyra can outrange him and kill him. But you know, he's a lot better against assassins. Zyra has some serious problems against assassins because she's very reliant on hitting her E and on assassins that are going invisible and running around and jumping over walls and stuff. And it makes it really difficult to land that E on him sometimes. So here's Zyra again. I've played her a lot earlier in the season. I have a full guide on her. She's one of the most popular champions on the channel. If you're not that familiar with Zyra or why she's strong, she does a ton of base damage early because of her plants. They do quite a lot of damage. They have a 0.5 ratio, and then at level 5, they do like 50 a pop. When there's 2 of them hitting people, it's a lot. And she has pretty long range where she can harass. So she can drop these seeds up to 850 away, and she can drop her Q 800 away. So she has a really safe harassment range. And she does a ton of all-in damage. So when she drops 2 plants and then ults, it's an extreme amount of damage. It doesn't look like it. It's like, oh, it's just dinky, you know, 180 damage, 265 damage. But it is a lot. So certainly the numbers aren't as insane as it looks like they are on someone like Fiddlesticks. She has much lower ratios, but a lot of it is because she has the plants. The plants do a lot of damage. So because of these plants, you really want spell penetration because their base is so high. Like their base damage is high, but their scaling is relatively low. So that means you want penetration. So ideally you would run penetration runes, and then you go haunting guys, sorcerer boots most of the time. So yeah, that's kind of Zyra. And then she has pretty good scouting too and vision control with her W, because you can, you know, put a seed in a bush 850 away. And a little known trick is if you actually spawn a plant in a bush with a Q, the plant can see the entire area even if there's a control ward there. So that's a really good way to clear out control wards, where you just spawn a plant and then you go up and clear out the control ward. So she's the queen of sort of bush control. Right, and if they want to go up and contest you there, they're going to take a bunch of damage from your plants to do it if they want to fight you while you're trying to clear the wards. So she has excellent zone control, excellent ward clearing capacities, excellent scaling, all in burst damage, great harassment early. She's just very susceptible to assassins. So now I made it work a lot earlier. You know, I had almost... When she was very good, they nerfed her directly in a lot of the champions she was good with. When she was very good, you know, I had like a 65% win rate my first like 200 games with her. So she can definitely be quite strong. And she's good with champions that end fights quickly. So other AD carries like Varus, Jhin, Misfortune, those 3 in particular, she's very, very good with them. Ashe, who doesn't end quickly, but she has great crowd control. So if Ashe hits someone with an arrow, that lets you full combo and probably kill him. Or vice versa. And that's the same kind of concept with Jhin, is like if you hit somebody with a plant and Jhin hits them with the W, they're going to be stunned, and then you can all in them. Or Varus hits them with an ult, you all in them with Zyra. So that's kind of the theme, is people that have this kind of all-in potential, where you hit them with everything, Misfortune gets to ult and free channel her ult. So she's very good with team fight comps and AD carries that do a lot of early game damage and have a lot of all-in kill threat at level 6. So she's not as good with someone like Twitch or Tristana or these like slow scaling champions that just don't do a lot of damage early. And she also has problems with range and poke. She doesn't have any innate heal, and her ranges aren't that long. They're okay. They're longer than Fiddle's, but she still has some serious problems with champions like Xerath, Veigar, Caitlyn, stuff like that. She's going to have a hard time with. But yeah, I think she's great. So good all-in, burst damage, great team fight capabilities. Really good complement to, you know, those 480 carries that I mentioned: Jhin, Misfortune, Ashe, Varus. So yeah, excellent pick. And finally, we have Thresh. I think Thresh came up a little bit too. He could run Ardent Censer if he wanted to. He doesn't have to. He could do Coin if he wanted to. He doesn't have to. He can switch over and go Relic Shield. And he's just a good... He's like a really good peel champion now. I'm not sure if he's necessarily better than Janna, but he serves a similar function where you can use your Flay and your ultimate to sort of peel assassins off of your AD carry. He is going to be tankier, so he doesn't get blown up himself by assassins. And he has really like long range engage. Like not super long range, but pretty long. I think his hook's like 1100. Yeah, so he's going to be much better against things like Veigar, Caitlyn, so on and so forth, because he can start fights from pretty far away. And he can itemize into different things too. So he can he's going to itemize and build a little bit tankier. Most likely. So like Face of the Mountain, Locket, Zeke's, that type of stuff. So, you know, everyone knows who Thresh is. He's pretty good. He has good engage, good peel, good lantern support if people are out of position and assassins are trying to run him down. So he just has a lot of tools in his toolkit. He's just very difficult to play correctly, and he doesn't do a lot of damage later in the game. He does quite a bit early, especially if you take Ignite. You definitely have kill threat in lane, but he just doesn't scale quite as hard in terms of damage later into the game as someone like Zyra or Fiddlesticks. But he is pretty good. He has diverse itemization paths, and if your team is like super like all squishy and you need a tank or some better long range engage, he's a pretty good option. Okay, so that's it for the kind of A-list here. So once again, these champions just kind of operate pretty well against assassins, except for Sona, but Sona operates pretty well if they don't have assassins, and she's just kind of the strongest sort of de facto. If everything is just kind of neutral, she's just going to be the highest impact of the three, most likely. But Fiddlesticks, if you're really proactive, you take over a game, you know how to position correctly, you don't ult when you shouldn't. That's the biggest thing with support Fiddlesticks. You're not going to do as much damage as Jungle Fiddle. Like, you still do some pretty good damage, but not like instantly erase everybody kind of damage. So you have to be a little bit more cautious with your ultimates. So Fiddlesticks is a little bit harder to play because of his positioning and just knowing his power spikes and things like that. But I still think he's pretty good. Yeah. So this is how I have the tier list. Okay, so who's kind of dropped down a little bit? Janna, everybody knows Janna. I talked about her a lot. She's down because she has a really weak laning phase now, and she doesn't scale as hard because Ardent got nerfed. But she still is pretty good against assassins. If you have the higher scaling AD carry by a large margin, so if you have Tristana and they have someone like, I don't know, Misfortune, then Janna can still be a pretty good pick. You're almost certainly going to get crushed in the lane, though, so you better have two other dominant lanes that you feel really confident in. So Janna's great if you get to the mid and the late game, but if your team gets run over early, she can have some problems. So this is why she fell down. She's just been hit directly and through two of her core items. So she's still good. She's still great against assassins. It's just a riskier pick because if they have higher scaling, or if other people on your team, if everybody just picks losing lanes, you know, you could just get run over before you get to really kick into high gear with your scaling. Okay, Rakan's another one. Rakan still is very good, but he's still a coin user. That got nerfed. Mana's not really a problem early on, so it's not as big of a deal on Rakan as it is on someone like Janna or like Lulu. So he's good at starting fights. He could kind of have a hard time against assassins. He can sort of escape them with his W, but he does get vaporized. He doesn't have a lot of defense. His crowd control is a little more questionable. He does have some. His peeling is okay, but it's not amazing on the AD carry. Like, you have to have your ult up before you can do anything useful most of the time. Like, you can still try to hit people with your W, but you know, a lot of assassins are pretty mobile and they'll probably be able to dodge it. I don't know. He's still good, but the fact that he's an Ardent user and a coin user, I think just pulls him down a little bit because both those items were nerfed. And he also has a really hard time against Veigar, who's becoming more popular. He has a hard time against Fiddlesticks. Hard time against Thresh. So he's got some tough matchups here. Really, all four of these are pretty tough matchups for Rakan. Like, Sona's going to outscale him. Fiddlesticks can fear him and all-in him. Zyra can outpoke him in lane. And then Thresh can flay back his W forward. And it's just kind of just a menace to go against in general. So Rakan is good. If your team has a Xayah, you know, I would strongly consider picking him up. If you don't have Xayah, you know, maybe think of something else. So he's good. He's a good initiate. I would just probably rather play, if I wanted to initiate, I'd probably rather just play Thresh, or maybe even Fiddlesticks. Okay, Nami. Nami's pretty good. She has better harassment than a lot of enchanters. Not Sona. Sona's similar, but she outscales. So I would almost always rather pick Sona than Nami. A couple of situations where that's not true is with Vayne, because of Vayne's kit, she wants to stick to people, hunt them down, and Nami's E helps her do that with sort of a slow that basically lasts 5 seconds, because it lasts for your next 3 autos, and each time it slows them for a second and a half. So it's like up to 4.5 seconds. on a repeatable slow that has a really long range. And she has good harassment in lane. She can shield, or heal rather, Vayne up. She just is really good because she has a mix of crowd control, slows, and sort of zone controls with her wave. It just complements Vayne really well. And then also Twitch is another one because she can heal him in lane if you have a tough lane. And then once again, you have that slow on your ultimate to hold people into the Twitch ultimate for longer so they don't run away. So I like her with Twitch. I like her with Vayne, but I probably would not play her with many other champions. She's pretty good with Jhin. Because if you land that bubble, that's a pretty good combo where you can zero people out. She just doesn't do as much damage as someone like a Zyra or a Fiddlesticks. So she's all right. She's good. If you want to play her, I highly recommend trying her out with Vayne and Twitch. Okay, Galio is another one. He was super overpowered mid lane. They hotfixed him on the first day. I predicted that he would be in my patch notes. So if you watched my patch notes and then you played on day one, you got to abuse Galio before anyone figured it out. Maybe you gained an entire division. 5 games in a row. Who knows? But I think he's still pretty good as an AP champion. I have him down in tier 2 because I think he could be pretty oppressive as a support with the AP build. The only problem is he has pretty high mana costs. So I think you'd have to get like a Morellonomicon early. Yeah, because this starts off at 70 and goes to 90. So, and you don't want to take 8 CS from your 80 carry either. So he's pretty good. He might deserve to be lower after that nerf. I still think he could be a pretty good AP champion. Now, his base damages aren't as high. So I would probably rather do Fiddlesticks or Zyra. But if you need someone who's kind of like a tank that pushes waves and sort of a tank AP hybrid, then he can be a good choice. And he's a defensive pick. So if you're like first pick and Galio's left open and you don't want the enemy team to have him, you could defensively pick him and make it work probably. So he's all right. He's all right. I don't think he's as good as some other champions at the support role. I think he's still overpowered in mid lane. But if you feel like you want to defensively pick him so the enemy doesn't get him, then I think he can work out. Okay, Blitzcrank. Everyone knows Blitz. Land a hook. Dominate a game. He's okay against assassins. The problem is he doesn't have great peel. It's okay. But if you have like a Zed that goes on your 80 carry, you're just not gonna be able to do anything about that most of the time. So he's all right. I just rather have Thresh. I think Thresh is more versatile. You know, fun fact, Thresh's hook, when you get enough CDR, only ends up being on like a 3 or 4 second cooldown, and then Blitz's, you know, even with CDR, is still gonna be like an 8 second cooldown. So Thresh just has a lot more uptime on his abilities, and he's not as contingent on hitting the hook. He can still do other things even if you miss your hook. So I would still prefer Thresh in most situations, but Blitzcrank does do a whole lot of burst damage, so in some ways, if you do consistently land hooks, that is very good with someone like Varus, Misfortune, those types of early game bully champions, and then of course assassins, if you hook somebody and pull them in and blow them up, that's going to be effective. So Blitz is good. If you're really good with Blitz, he could be as high as tier 1, but I think, just for a lot of people, he's kind of a decent champion, but not amazing. Still good. Still up in the top spot. Lulu falls down a little bit here. The thing about Lulu, I don't know. Like, she could go higher, but she's inherently not super safe because she only has 650 range on her E. Her shield is very low. She does have an ultimate, which is good against assassins. And, of course, her polymorph is pretty good against assassins. The problem is she just has like no damage output and no scaling. So it's okay. I mean, you can go Spell Thieves on her, but she just doesn't have very good AP ratios. Oh, sweet. What we got going on here?
Thank you so much, Strategy Professor.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, friend. Queen Liv. I appreciate it. So, yeah, where's Lulu? There we go. Okay, so Lulu. So, she just, if you look at her abilities, like, she's only got a 0.5 on her Glitter Lance. She's only got a 0.5, on her bonus attack speed thing. She's only got a 0.6 on her shield. She's only got a 0.5 on her ult. So these are really, really low numbers compared to someone like Fiddlesticks, you know, who just has insane AP ratios on all of his abilities. So she's all right. It's just her shield is a lot weaker than it used to be. Her polymorph is good, but it's like, this is not as good on someone like Misfortune as it is on someone like Twitch, for example. So she's still a good pick with like Kog'Maw or Twitch, people that really want to attack fast that have some kind of inherent bonus on their attack. And she does push lanes early, which is nice. So she can push. She does have really good steroids. But the fact that, you know, once again, Ardent got nerfed, Coin got nerfed. She can do Spell Thieves. It's okay. She does decent damage early. You know, I still think that she's really good. But she has matchup problems against Sona. She has matchup problems against Nami, because both of them have heals and early harass. She has pretty bad matchups against Zyra in lane because she doesn't have a heal. So that's not good, that she has bad matchups against 3 of the top 4 champions. She's okay against Thresh. Not amazing. So I just think she has bad matchups against a lot of the top tier other supports. But she is pretty good into an assassin meta because of the polymorph. So if you win a lot with her, it's still a pretty good time to Lulu. You know, if you take Thunderlords and Ignite, you can put out a lot of damage. You can have kill threat early. But you don't ever want to take a losing trade because you don't have any heals to recover. So she's a bit of a riskier pick. She's a riskier pick. So she's pretty good. She doesn't roam that well. She's okay. Just like rolling up and like polymorphing somebody is not as good as Fiddle, like, you know, rolling up, fearing, draining, silencing, ulting people. So her roam's okay. It's not amazing. Her laning is okay, depending on the matchup. And her late game scaling is still pretty good if you have a hyper carry that's fed. If you don't have a Kog'Maw or a Twitch that's fed, you know, it's not going to be as good. So like putting your Whimsy on someone like Zed is okay. Like, you're giving them bonus attack speed and some movement speed, but that's not really what they're all about. You know, they just want to cast their spells and blow people up, and that's it. So the movement speed is good, but if it's not going to be someone who's going to sit there and just like spam auto attacks, then she's not going to be as strong. And usually that's just going to be your AD carry in this meta. So you're really heavily dependent on your AD carry, which is not amazing. I mean, even someone like Janna can show up and like shield and, you know, do some other useful stuff. I mean, Lulu can shield, but it's a lot weaker than Janna's. So I just don't think she's as versatile. And someone like Sona, for example, if your AD carry's behind, you can still just show up in team fights and just have a massive impact on everybody, just with your auras, even if your AD carry's behind. So I just feel like she's just riskier. Lulu's just riskier, but she can be very good. If you have a Cog or a Twitch, you want that extra bonus you can give them, but you also want the security of having that ult or having the option to polymorph if you want to. So she's good with a hyper carry. If you're against like a tank bot lane that doesn't have a lot of engage, like maybe against a Braum or a Taric or something, I still think she'd be a pretty good pick. But if you're against something that's really aggressive, like a Zyra or a Sona early on, then you're going to have some problems. Okay, kind of tier 3. So these champions are good. And, you know, I know some of them might raise an eyebrow. So they are good, but I just feel like they just are not as great in the current meta as these top 10 here. You know, my tier 1 and tier 2 are always top 10, regardless. And that just means that someone has to be number 11, right? Someone has to be even lower. So Soraka is my number 1 at the top here. A lot of tier lists will put her as like in the top tier, but I think she's got some problems now. I think she's the one who's hurt most by all these changes. So she's fallen quite a bit. I'm pretty sure I had her in tier 2 last patch. But, you know, she is kind of one of the quintessential coin users. Like, she can use Spell Thieves. Her AP ratios aren't amazing, but she can use Spell Thieves if she wants. So she's only got a 0.35 on the damage on her Q, which is pretty abysmal. She does have a 0.6 on her Astral Infusion, which is good. And, you know, 0.4, 0.55. This does hit multiple targets, but it's pretty low. Pretty low scaling, so she's not going to be amazing with Spell Thief. She can get it if you really have to. She's very easy to gank. So, you know, in a meta where there are lots of very creative gankers that do a ton of damage, you know, thinking about Kayn, thinking about someone like Ezreal, who just has a lot of creative gank pass and a ton of early game damage. Jarvan, it's just really, really risky to run because she has no escapes. Like the only thing you can do is try to hit him with Star Call and run away, and like that's basically it. And so she just has a huge bullseye on her head. So that's a big one because people are playing these more aggressive junglers now. Like I said, she got hit by the coin nerf because she doesn't scale very well with Spell Thieves. She doesn't have, like, she can heal herself with her Q in lane, but it's not guaranteed you have to hit it, and so she can have a hard matchup against someone like a Zyra, if Zyra can consistently land plants on her. She can usually heal through Zyra, but it can kind of be tough. And then, of course, the Ardent Sensor nerf is pretty rough as well because she doesn't bring a lot of damage to the table herself. So being able to put that damage on your AD carry through Ardent Sensor was really important for her. And so I think the fact that people were being more aggressive much earlier in the game, like I said, is tough for her. Her itemization got hit, and she's just naturally going to be at a lot lower health than a lot of the other enchanters because it costs her health to use her heal. Sona is the exact opposite. Whenever you heal somebody, it heals you too. So now Sona's heal isn't as good as hers, but remember, Sona also hands out a shield. That's another thing, is because she's like all in on heals, then she gets extremely punished if the enemy gets Executioner's Calling, or if they have Bramble Vest, or if they have Morellonomicon. You know which items are really popular? Morellonomicon, Bramble Vest, and Executioner's not super popular, but smart players will get it. Morellonomicon's like everywhere on most champions, and so that's always going to be a real menace for Soraka to deal with. But yeah, cutting her healing is a huge deal, and the fact that she goes to low health against a heavily assassin like flanking meta is very difficult. And if she tries to go ward, she doesn't have escape, so if Kha'Zix jumps out of that bush, you're trying to ward, you're dead, you know? So if you did not play earlier in this season in a meta that was dominated by assassins, lethality champions, and all that stuff, you don't know true terror until you try to play Soraka in that kind of meta. It is rough. I'm telling you, it's very rough. And I think that's what we're transitioning back to. And so I think that she's got some problems. Now in the preseason, you know, we'll see what happens. Perksy's going to be very good on her. You know, she might be able to get some other like runes that will help her with mobility or help her escape. We'll kind of see what the final version of those runes ends up being. But I haven't seen anything that really like screams Soraka. I just think basically any time you would want to play Soraka in this meta, you need to just play Sona. Sona just has much better consistent harass early. She scales much harder, and she keeps herself a lot safer because she shields and heals herself. And Sona's W, don't forget, is about half heal and half shield, and shield is not affected by Executioner's Calling. So Executioner's is good against Sona, but Sona can still like work her way around it through the shielding. So, and Sona also has better crowd control. She at least has an ultimate that crowd controls. This does heal people globally, which is nice. It's on a massive cooldown though, and it is not crowd control. So I think that Soraka can be good. I just think that Sona's better. Sona's also very susceptible to ganks, but remember that Sona with her E does allow her to move faster, and that allows your team to rotate faster. So, and Sona takes objectives faster, so she takes dragons, barons, all that stuff a lot faster. So I just feel like Sona's just better in virtually every way than Soraka right now, especially in a an assassin heavy meta. Especially when there's all that healing debuff items that are very popular. Okay, Morgana. So Morgana's another one who was popular for a while there. She's good if you if the enemy has a lot of crowd control and you black shield someone of like very high importance, like a hyper carry, like a Twitch or a Kog'Maw or something like that. That can be pretty good. The problem with Sona is she doesn't have any defense against AD. Like that shield does not block AD damage, and AD assassins are becoming the most popular thing right now. I just mentioned it earlier when I was on here, but a lot of the champions people are playing, I mean, we've got Jace becoming popular, we've got Rek'Sai, we've got Xayah, of course, Gnar, Kha'Zix, Jhin, Urgot, Yasuo, Kayn, Xayah. This is so common to see just things like this, where you have like 3 ADs on a team that are a threat. Right? Renekton, Ezreal, Sivir, Darius, Kha'Zix, Trist, Yasuo, Wukong, Jhin. I mean, all of these. Camille, Lee, Vayne. it's so common to see triple AD threat, where you've got AD carry, jungler, top, or AD. And then sometimes mid's AD too. I mean, Vi, Talon, Twitch. You know, it's like clockwork almost every time. Pantheon, Kayn, Darius, Fiora, Zen, Trist. I mean, it's like almost literally every single game is going to have 2 to 3 big AD threats. And the problem is the spell shield doesn't do anything. Like, it doesn't do anything against Kayn. It doesn't do anything against Talon or Fiora. Like, it's okay, but it's not great. And she could use Ardent. That was one thing that kind of brought her into play, is she could use Ardent. Now she doesn't have that option. So, and she doesn't scale as well. Like, she does have AP ratios, but she doesn't have a lot of plus healing and shielding. She doesn't do a ton of damage. So she's okay. Like, she's still a decent pick if you want to shield your AD carry from someone like a Nautilus ultimate, or might be pretty good into Veigar if you can put it up before they get stunned. Good against Leona. Good against Thresh. So, you know, there are still some good matchups for Morgana out there. I just think that she had a brief sort of moment there where she was good, where people weren't playing a lot of AD. A lot of people were playing these crowd control tanks, you know, like Sejuani, Gragas, stuff like that. She's a lot better against those. Good against Ashe. But those are kind of starting to fade out of the picture a little bit in favor of really high AD damage. And she's just, that's not her thing. She's not great at that. Okay, Bard actually moved up quite a bit. I had him in tier 4, but I moved him up here. I know a lot of people like to see that. The reason is, you know, Bard has great early game harassment and pressure. So he did not really like getting coin. He wants to get Spell Thieves, and he really doesn't like having to get Ardent Sensor. He could get it, but he doesn't like it. He doesn't have a good way to trigger it on multiple people, and the thing that he does have that can trigger it is something that you don't really want to level up that much, that has a long cooldown. So, you know, Bard is very happy that coin and Ardent Sensor got nerfed. So he's okay. I don't think he's as good at, I don't think he brings as much to the table as someone like Fiddlestick, Zyra, Nami, Sona, Lulu, those kind of people. But he does do a lot of damage early on. He is really good at roaming. So if you think you can roam middle and consistently, you know, make a huge impact, that can be good. Just a core problem with Bard, which still persists, is that if you leave your lane to roam too much, which he has to get meeps, you're risking your AD carry either dying, or sometimes in the best case scenario, not dying, but missing significant CS. So if you go roaming around all the time, even if your AD carry doesn't die, they're going to be down like 15 CS. And so it's taxing your lane to go try to make these plays. So if you don't convert on the plays, if you don't actually get kills middle, if you don't kill the enemy jungler, then he can fall far behind. So you can't just sit in lane and harass, you know, with your auto attacks and your Q and stuff like that. And he's okay at that. But I just feel there are a lot of opportunities for him to fail, both on the macro level, knowing when and where to rotate, and then also on the mechanical level, if you hit the wrong thing with your ult, right? So if you're trying to hit the enemy, you miss him, or you hit your own ally and save the enemy, or whatever. There are a lot of complicated aspects to his kit that are really easy for both you and your allies to mess up. And his itemization is not that great. He has very low scaling. 2 of his abilities don't scale at all. Like, they have no ratios on them whatsoever. So that's bad. So really his only scaling is like the meeps, and he has a light AP ratio. So like the meeps have an AP ratio on him of 30, which is good. And then his Q has a ratio of 0.65, which is kind of, you know, whatever. But then his, I guess his W does have a very small ratio on it. But then his Magical Journey and his Ultimate have no ratios on them whatsoever. So that's rough. So yeah, he's okay. He's good early game aggression. He does have good rotations. He has a lot of fun. I really enjoy playing Bard. And he does have an ultimate that just, you know, has a lot of really cool interactions and capabilities. So he's a really fun champion. He's exciting. He's great design. Just Riot just needs to buff him some, man. Like, just make these meeps do other things. Like, make him give him cooldown reduction, or make him, like, empower his other abilities. Like, maybe after he gets so many meeps, his magical journey is even faster. Like, people travel through it faster. Or maybe if enemies travel through it, it damages them. Or if you travel through it, or if your allies travel through it, it heals them. How cool would that be? If his magical journey, if people took it, if it actually healed them. If they were your allies, or like damaged enemies, right? So then you would have kind of this tension where if someone's low, but they take and maybe it's based on how far they travel. So if you like get your allies to come in and travel this long distance into the enemy, maybe if they were a little injured, they get healed over that entire travel and then they show up like healthy, ready to fight. I mean, I think there are a lot of cool opportunities where they could give these abilities a bit more utility based on your meeps. But as it stands, it's not there. So there's a lot of space there from a design standpoint to do some really cool things, but it's just not there yet. And they just need to, or maybe if they go through the magical journey, they could get some extra, like, I don't know, speed or be empowered, like have empowered auto attacks or something when they show up, or just something that gives them, like, when he rolls up with enemies through this, they get powerful somehow. Something happens to him where they get powerful. Maybe they show up with a shield for, 5 seconds or something. Who knows? But I think that, they just need to redefine him and just give him some kind of scaling on one of these two abilities. Maybe every person that you hit with this refunds 15 seconds of its cooldown. Something like that. So if you get really rewarded for hitting like 4 people ultimate to set up a team fight, maybe the cooldown would get reduced by, whatever, 50 seconds, something like that. So just something to reward good bard play and something that would help him out with scaling and give him a bit more utility, I think would be great. But I'm not on the design team. I can't do these things. So as it currently stands, though, his scaling is pretty weak. He has a good, strong early game, but I think he's just going to get beaten up later unless you're just really on point with your team and you're coordinating and working around all of his abilities very well. Taric is another one. I hear people all the time on the channel saying, this guy's super powerful. You can win a ton with him. I win a lot with him. If you win with him, just play him, man. Like, I personally do not think that Taric, he's okay. Like, the problem with Taric is he's extremely team reliant. You might say, like, as a support, well, of course it's team reliant. Everybody has a team. Everyone's team reliant. But what I mean by that is that there are a lot of ways that your teammates, that both you and your teammates can make mistakes with his abilities. Okay? So, the number one is if people run out of your Cosmic Radiance. So if you, like, try to set this up and people either don't get the buff, or when they do, they just run away, that's not going to be great. Or if the enemy runs away. So if you cast this and maybe it's too early, or maybe, someone on your team misses their crowd control. So, like, maybe, you want to go into a fight and you start casting this, like, maybe your Sejuani pings it a lot, and then she misses her ult or something like that, and the enemy just disengages, then you just completely wasted this. So for this to be effective, your allies really have to be on point, like ready to stick their head down and stay in the fight, and typically you have to crowd control the enemy so they can't just disengage and run away from this. So this is really powerful, but also maybe you press it too late and your ally just dies when you're trying to use it. It does have a 2.5 second delay on it. So there's a lot of room to mess this up. Dazzle's pretty good, but it has a very slender hitbox, only 70, and it's pretty close range, so enemies can sidestep it pretty easily, so it's a tricky thing to hit correctly. It does decent damage, but once again, it's pretty tricky for you to hit correctly, and the enemy has plenty of time to react as well, so they can just dash, flash, whatever, get out of it if they want to. So there's a lot of counterplay to it. Bastion's pretty good. I like this ability. Nice shield. Pretty straightforward. Starlight's good. Heals people. However, all of his abilities are predicated on his passive, which means you have to stay in combat and keep attacking people. I don't like this because you're going to take a lot of extra collateral damage if you just sit in the middle of everybody and just try to auto a lot. You're just going to be getting hit by all this extra damage. You're going to be getting hit by Kennen ults, Amumu ults, like Ziggs ults, Misfortune ults. So you're just going to get caught and take a lot of extra damage that you don't need to take because you're going to be tempted to sit in there and auto attack people every time you cast this. If you don't, if you just hang out in the back where you should while you're casting abilities, you're going to have really long cooldowns on everything. So you kind of have to be in combat. You have to be attacking. And that's okay against tanks because, a tank's going to be on your AD carry most of the time, and so you can sit there and cast abilities and keep auto attacking the tank, and it's not really a threat to kill you. But when their whole team, are these assassin type of champions, you're not going to get to sit there and attack Kha'Zix a lot. He's just going to kill your AD carry, like, while you're waiting on cooldowns a lot of the time. So he's okay. I do think that the nerf to Coin and the nerf to Ardent Censer both hurt him He liked both of those. He's going to have mana problems without coin. He's probably going to have to take Relic Shield now. And then Ardent Censer, of course, he was very good at proccing it with the Starlight's Touch, where you can heal a bunch of allies. So that really hurts him there. So he can still run things like Knight's Vow, Redemption, things like that. But I think that he definitely falls off a little bit. He's very easy to gank and kill because he has no escapes and he's very slow. So he's kind of got Soraka-itis there. So he's all right. I mean, you can win with him for sure. But I just think it's a little bit harder than it is with other people. And he has very bad matchups against Sona in particular. Sona can out-harass him in lane, and she's going to outscale him later on. Those auras are just going to crush you in team fights most of the time. And then he has a bad time against Zyra as well. He can get poked out. His heal is pretty anemic early on. It's like, it's okay. It's not amazing. Fiddle's pretty tough. I mean, Fiddle can push you into tower. And then by the time your ult goes off, people are probably already going to be dead when Fiddle shows up from around a bush with an ultimate or something. So he's okay. He just has bad matchups against a lot of the other top tier champions. But if your team really needs a tank, if they have assassins and you're afraid you're going to get blown up as Sona and you're looking for another good like team fight tank and you have a pretty easy lane, I think he can be all right. He can be all right. Tahm Kench is not great in an assassin meta because if you eat somebody and try to save them from crowd control or something, and Kha'Zix is just going to run them down, or Kayn or Ezreal or whomever, you know, Tahm Kench is really best against people who have really long cooldown crowd control abilities that just don't have a lot of effectiveness if they don't have their crowd control. So like Ashe, Leona, Thresh, he's very good against those champions. So you can still play him into those if you want, but he's just not that strong right now. He's okay. He's okay, like I said, but he's more of a counter pick, like a 4th or a 5th pick if they have a lot of crowd control. Right? If you specifically want to hose, like, you know, if the enemy team has like Ashe, Leona, or if they have Varus, Thresh, or something like that, he can particularly hose those type of champions. So he's a good counter pick to that type of stuff, but overall, he's still like not amazing, but he's all right. He's all right. He's kind of, you know, a good counter pick in certain matchups. Alistar, decent. He certainly gets better now that Janna's worse. You know, obviously he didn't like to go coin. He didn't like to go Ardent Censer. So it's possible Alistar should be up higher than this as a peel champion. I mean, he could even be as high as tier 2. I wouldn't put him in tier 1, but he could be as high as tier 2 instead of something like Galio. So he's all right. I mean, the thing about Alistar, he does have excellent peel, and he can engage and fight pretty easily. So, I mean, it's totally possible he deserves a better slot here. I'll have to try him out again and see what's up. But, you know, as it stands, I still think that he doesn't have escapes. He's melee, doesn't do a lot of damage. And his real strength is tower diving, and that's just really hard to coordinate in solo queue. So, I still don't think itemization is great for tanks right now. It's okay, as I described earlier in the video, but that's why I have him down here. I'd rather just play Thresh, honestly, most of the time. Like, Thresh just has longer range, safer engage, just safer overall, and has a bit more utility than Alistar does. Braum, same deal, has really good peel, doesn't have a lot of great engage, but he does, you know, people are playing more melee champions, right, as I just said. So, you know, that's more opportunities to trigger his passive. So, he's okay. Braum's pretty good. I think Braum is best picked into Twitch and Xayah in particular because they have area of effect ultimates, or not I guess Xayah's is just a normal with her attacks with feathers, but they have these kind of area of effect abilities that your shield negates. So I think that he's best into those champions that have certain windows of AoE power where if you shut them down with that shield, they're you know, going to have a much harder time. So I would specifically pick him 4th or 5th pick as a counter pick to Twitch or Xayah if your team needs more, maybe needs more tankiness, and if you have other auto attack based champions. Like, he'd be great with like an Ezreal on your team too, so that you could trigger that stun more. So there are certain circumstances where I think he could be really good. It's just, it's not a lot of them. So he's kind of a niche counter pick, sort of like I would see Tahm Kench. Annie's kind of the low elo special here. I wouldn't recommend her at Plat Plus, but she can be very powerful. And she's very simple to use. So if you're kind of newer to the game and you just want to play an AP champion, or if you just want to play something that's consistent, and does a lot of damage. You can try out Annie. I mean, she's all right with Spell Thief. She has a really long auto attack range. I think it's still, is it still 625, or did they nerf that a long time ago? She used to have one of the longest auto attacks in the game, which is great for triggering Spell Thieves. 575. Okay, so they did nerf it, but it's still pretty long. 575. She has a point-click stun, lots of damage, very easy to combo, excellent ratios. So she doesn't have very high base damages. They're okay, but they're not like Zyra or Brand or Fiddlesticks level. But they're okay. So really good roam. Lots of uptime on Tibbers. It's a low cooldown, and he stays up for 45 seconds. So if you kill somebody with Tibbers, you know, let's say you just all in bot lane and kill him with Varus or Misfortune or whatever. Just flash ult, kill him. You can use Tibbers to tank and take towers. You can use him to get early dragons. So Tibbers does have quite a bit of utility to him. And Annie's just, like I said, very simple. You know exactly what you're going to get. All in, boom, kill him. It's great. So I think that, now she has a bad early laning phase. Your Q is pretty short range. You can spam it. It doesn't do a ton of damage. So you're going to get busted up by something like a Zyra in lane most of the time. And Sona's going to be able to heal through whatever you have. Once you hit 6, and you get like an amp tome or something in your inventory, then you can definitely come through and do some serious damage. So I don't think she's amazing, but I think that she's okay, and I think that she is very straightforward for people that want to play an AP support. You're newer to the game, or you just, you know, prefer her style over someone like Zyra or Fiddle. I think she's a decent option for AP supports. Leona, I put up here a little bit. People keep asking about her. I think she's very good. Once again, she's kind of a bronze silver special. Very good, aggressive champion. Has a ton of crowd control. Does decent damage with her passive. You've been seeing her more and more at Worlds. So very low cooldown ultimate. So this is really one of the best things, is you can roam around. If you consistently hit that solar flare, you can really make some plays with her. So she has very good roaming opportunities. Once you get your Mobies and your Sightstone, you're good to go. So she benefits very heavily from Janna not being in the meta as much, because Janna shuts her down pretty hard. And she's actually pretty good against Sona, Zyra, and Fiddlesticks. Thresh is very good against her. But she's good against those three. If you can land your E, and if you have someone on your team who can convert kills. So she's very good with other crowd control AD carries. So Varus, Ashe, Jhin, and then she's pretty good with Misfortune too. So any caster AD carries, if you can just roam around, make plays. I mean, maybe after the meta changes, maybe she deserves to be as high as tier 2. Just she kind of has the problem of some of these other champions that I mentioned, like Taric, Alistar, and that, you know, if you go in, you're not going out. Like, you don't have escapes. So if you go in and the jungler all of a sudden shows up, or, you know, your AD carry just completely messes up and the fight starts looking really bad, then you're going to kind of be screwed because you can't get back out. So I would still prefer, if you want someone who's going to start fights, you know, I would prefer something like a Thresh or a Rakan or something like that. But I still think that she can do some damage and get the job done if you enjoy her. So I think it's been a better meta for her now than it has been in a long time. So we'll put it that way. If you like Leona, dust her off, give her a whirl. I think, like I said, she's particularly good in bronze, silver, and probably even gold. I mean, we've seen her in the pro stage a couple of times. So, you know, you can make her work. She's just a riskier pick, I think, than some other choices. Okay, Brand is the last one I'm going to talk extensively about here. And this, we can end this 5-hour video. It's going to be about 2 hours. But there's a lot of meta shifts, and I just felt like I really needed to talk about it because I know people are going to be like, why? Why is Fiddlestick so high? Why, you know, why is Soraka so much lower? And so I thought it warranted a lot of talk about it. So I'll have the timestamp so that people can, you know, jump around. Okay, so Brand's thing is he does a lot of damage, but he's a mana hog, and he requires a lot of setup. So he's strong, but I think that Zyra's better. Like, that's what it comes down to. He's strong. I think Zyra and Fiddle are both better at what they want to do. So he did just get a buff where every time you kill a minion, you get extra mana back. It doesn't matter support. You're not going to be killing a lot of minions. But he does maximum % damage every time he hurts people. And when he stacks up to 3, it does a lot of damage. So basically, he has really high base damage. His spells themselves don't do a ton. They're okay. But you need to combo them together, which costs a lot of mana. So you need to hit 3 spells to get your maximum damage on people, which usually means Pillar of Flame, which is going to cost you, you know, at level 5, 80 mana. Your Q's 50, so that's 130 mana. Then you're going to have to Conflagrate, which will be level 1. That's 200 mana. And you'll probably want to ult him, so that's like 300 mana. It's like his entire mana pool for like 1 spell rotation. So he does do a lot of damage. He does have good AoE teamfight presence, so he can be great. He just has a lot of mana problems. He has pretty low base mana regen. It's only 8 instead of like Sona or Janna's 12. So he's good. You better be able to hit your stuff and chain it together, and it's harder to do than with someone like Zyra, because Zyra can harass through minion waves. You know, her plants don't care. You just spawn them wherever. Whereas Brand has to get a clear shot with his Q to land that stun, and that's core to his trading patterns. So he's all right. I just think that he's not quite as good as someone like Zyra at lane harassment, and certainly not as good as someone like Fiddlesticks in the open field, because he doesn't have very reliable crowd control. Okay, that's going to be it. Other picks of note, you know, I've got Karma down here. She's okay. She has decent harass. She's just going to get completely blown out by a Sona or a Nami pick most of the time. They're just better choices. Ever since she got nerfed, it's not a great meta. She doesn't have a lot of hard crowd control. She just does not do that well against assassins. She has good teamfight presence with her ultimate plus shield, but I just think that Sona's better in every way. Nautilus is okay, you know, point click ult, has good engage, just tanks aren't that great right now. If you want to play something like Nautilus, I would recommend just going with Thresh. I think he has a lot more utility, better itemization. Oh, we'll take that off. There we go. And everything else I think is, you know, you can just kind of read it and see for yourself. I think those are the 3. Vel'Koz, primarily because you have to channel his ult, and that leaves you really vulnerable to flanking. And so I would rather just have the point click, boom, lots of damage, you know, with someone like Fiddle, Brand, Zyra, all those things. He is pretty good against breaking tanks, though, potentially. So there are some circumstances where Vel'Koz could be good, but he's got some problems. Everyone asks about Zilean. Zilean just requires a lot of prep and setup, and it's just very conditional with not as much payout. I mean, if you land the double bomb, it is nice. Like, I've seen really good Zilean players before, but I think just you can just play something like Zyra or Lulu, or just other things are going to be a lot more consistent in their performance than someone like Zilean is. So Zilean can be good. I just think he's not consistent enough. And I just saw Rammus down here too. That reminds me. Rammus is actually really good right now in the jungle, and he's one of the tanks that people are still playing, and Fiddlesticks crushes Rammus. So that's another reason that Fiddle's really good in this meta, because both your Fear stops his Powerball and your Silence stops his Powerball. I didn't realize the Silence did until I did it to a Fiddle the other day. Silence, so Soraka's Silence can also stop the Powerball. Yeah, if you silence him, it counts as a channeled cast now. And so if you stop the channel, then that will knock him out of it. So yeah, so Fiddle's very good in that circumstance. Okay, well that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Really detailed. I know it's going to be controversial. I've shifted a lot of stuff around, but I'm telling you, I think this is going to be the best stuff on this patch. I don't think people are going to be very privy to it. I don't think a lot of people are going to figure out about Fiddle early enough. People are going to know Sona's good. They're going to figure out pretty quickly that Zyra's good again, and that Thresh are good again. I think Fiddlesticks is really the sleeper right now, and I think he's going to be a powerhouse pick. I think he's going to be pretty good in the preseason too with Glacial Augment. We'll talk about that more when the preseason comes out. I'll have a whole video about it, but I think he's looking good right now on 721. I think he's looking pretty good in the future too, for the reasons I described. So he's really the biggest sleeper on this patch. Okay, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.